middle of December of last year, probably about the beginning of the month. I was sitting in my office. There was a lady across the table from me staring at me with a blank look. No life in her face, no joy, no tears, just blank. She shared with me that about 6 years before her husband had died while on the job, they were living in South America at the time. She moved up here with her 3 daughters, and just a few days before I was meeting with her, and it was actually the reason why I was meeting with her, her middle child, her middle daughter, while on FaceTime with some friends, decided, let's try some pills together and just see what happens. And that little 14-year-old girl died. As I looked at the mom's face, there was nothing but grief. Nothing but heartache. If you've ever seen somebody who's cried so many tears they can't cry anymore. And my heart broke for her. Josh is telling that story about the people who've been running for their lives, experiencing incredible pain and loss. And you can see it in their faces. You can see it in their lives. Just an absolute brokenness, because loss is incredibly painful. We're going through this book of Ruth. We're in chapter 1. And what we're looking at today is we find Naomi. She's gone to the country of Moab, outside of the nation of Israel, because there was a famine. And she's there, and she's going to experience incredible loss. Her husband is going to die, and her 2 sons are going to die while in Moab. She is at a place of incredible loss. In fact, let's just jump in here. This is in Ruth. I'm picking up in chapter 1, verse 8. It's in Spanish for those who prefer reading along there. Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, their 2 sons had been married. Like I said, her husband and 2 sons have now died. She said to the 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me." She's saying to Ruth and to another lady named Orpah, "Go back to your moms. Go back." Later then, she says, "Turn back, my daughters." Why? Because I don't have any sons for you to marry. All of my family, everybody's dead. I have nothing for you. And then just another verse later, she says again, "Turn back, my daughters, because I'm too old to even get married. If you're coming with me, I want you to know this: there's no hope with me. I have nothing to give you, and I am nothing. Turn back." Orpah, with much grieving and tears, goes. But Ruth goes, "No, I am not going. I will not leave you. I will go and I will stay with you. Your people will be my people. Your God is going to be my God." We pick up in verse 16. Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Naomi was not even moved by her care. She was so broken, so hurt, in such pain, she just figured, I can't get him to leave, or get her to leave, so I guess I'll stop trying. Verse 19, so the 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. Now they're back in Israel, in Bethlehem, and when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" Last verse, verse 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Naomi is in a bad place. Now, I don't know if you've ever experienced that kind of loss in life. Some of you have. Some of you have experienced the pain of losing family members. I have. Our family's experienced that. It's horrible. But in order to make sure that we're all understanding even the context of what it means to have this unlikely love of God springing up from a place of loss, it's important to know this, that loss is not only the loss of loved ones, although that certainly is part of it. Loss can be the loss of anything, and it can be on any level of pain. So I brought an apple as an example here. You see this apple, it has all the things that an apple has, but if I take the stem and I pull that off, has the apple lost anything? Yes, it's lost the stem. It's still an apple, but there's something still kind of attached to it. Now, if I decided to go ahead and begin to peel this apple, has the apple lost anything? Yes. Probably more so than the stem. If the apple could feel, that would hurt. Now, if I were to see if I can do this without hurting myself, remove the core of the apple, has the apple lost anything? Yes. Now, where the stem may have hurt a little bit, and maybe the peeling would have hurt a little bit more, when it takes the core out, the apple has lost any ability to reproduce. And it just hurts. My friends, we all have different levels of pain and hurt and loss. But it doesn't matter. That does not mean that the loss does not matter. For some of you, your loss may feel like the stem. It's not that big of a deal, but it still kind of meant something. It wasn't something that defined me, but it still hurt. I still feel that loss. Maybe it was something more of like this level of loss. We're like, it didn't necessarily end my life, but I can feel that pain. It hurt. It cut deep. Maybe it's the loss of a job, the loss of a friend, the loss of your health. It doesn't necessarily change the fact that you're a person, but it hurts. And for some of you, you feel like you have had the core ripped out of you. And that can happen by a lot of different things. Yes, death in the family, sure. But it could be some kind of news, something that's happening in your marriage, something that happens to your finances, whatever it is where you just feel like, I don't know if I can go on. We all have this level of loss. We all experience the understanding of that pain. So no matter what your experience, if it's the stem kind of loss, if it's a peeling kind of loss, or maybe you just feel like your core has been ripped out, God's love is displayed in those times. But here's what we know about loss. Are you ready? I know we just had like this child dedication, everything was so happy, and then you're like, John, this is a bummer. It's going to get better, but hang with me. Remember, we're in a time of Lent, by the way. And Lent begins with Ash Wednesday, and it ends with the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus. But in between, it's this time to kind of look at our hearts and go, God, what is it in me that maybe you want to do and change and fix and heal? And that's why we're looking at this story in Ruth, because Ruth is a story of a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. Today, it's this issue of loss. Number one, loss feeds loneliness. Everybody say that together. Loss feeds loneliness. What does that mean? It means exactly what Naomi was doing. In the time of her loss, her husband dies, her sons die, she still has family, but what does she say to them? Go back. Return. Don't stay with me. 3 times. And it's not that these ladies didn't love her, they did. In fact, they were telling her, no, please don't send us away. But loss feeds loneliness. Stay away from me. I'm hurting. I have nothing to give you, and I am nothing. This is what loss does to us. When we are hurt, no matter how deep, our tendency is to push people away. That is human nature. I have been hurt. Stay away from me. Even people who love you. You start pushing people away. Loss feeds loneliness. Turn back. I have nothing to give. Turn back. I'm nothing. You know, it's interesting that Ruth, who Scripture makes very clear, is a Moabite. That means she's not Jewish. She's of a group of people who do not love God, who do not worship God. That's her culture. That's her people. They were actually enemies. The Moabites were enemies to the Israelites. She was a Moabite. And here she is the only one who stays with Naomi. Can I say something real quick? Do not be surprised that in your time of loss, that the only person who stays with you is somebody who's not a Christian at all. I hear this all the time when people are hurting. Oh, the church wasn't there for me. No Christian was there for me. But here's the point. They were there for you often, but you're not in a place to receive it. Remember, Naomi had already left the nation of Israel. And even if God had sent somebody who loves the Lord and sent them to her, she was going to push him away anyway. I know I've heard this story many times. I've experienced this. In a place where you have a lot of people moving in and moving out. That one lady was telling me, you know, when I came to this church, I had so many friends. Oh, I had all these friends, and we just hung out together, and we would do things together. It was just so much fun. But over time, all of my friends moved away, and now I come to church, and I don't have any friends. Church has now become lonely. Do you see how that happens so fast? Loss feeds loneliness. When you have that sense of, I've lost friends, people have gone away, there's this loss in my life, all of a sudden, that starts to make me feel like I'm no longer connected. And maybe even I don't want to be connected. Loss feeds loneliness. Second, loss feeds bitterness. Naomi said it. She comes back, right? And she says, don't call me Naomi, which means gentle. Call me Mara, which means bitter. Naomi is changing her own name. She is upset. I bet Naomi was the kind of woman you probably wouldn't want to hang out with. I bet she had turned pretty nasty. Don't call me gentle, call me bitter. Whoa, okay. But she was incredibly upset. Her bitterness directed at the Lord. She says, I went away full. I went away full. But Yahweh brought me back empty. Who is her bitterness directed at? God. Her bitterness is directed at God. I went away full. I was good, fine. Yes, I was walking away from Israel. Yes, I went to Moab, but I was full. And the Lord, Yahweh, He brought me back empty. She goes on and says, Yahweh has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity on me. Almighty is the word Shaddai, El Shaddai, which means the God who provides, the God who is all-sufficient. Here's what she's saying. You know El Shaddai, the one who has everything, the one who provides everything? Not for me. No, you know what He did to me? This is what Shaddai did. He testified against me and brought me back empty. You see, because loss feeds bitterness. Directed at God. And you know this is true. When you talk to somebody who's lost a loved one, as a pastor, I get this all the time. Why would God do this? If God is all powerful and God is all loving, then why wouldn't He stop this? Why wouldn't He change that? He's God, right? Then why doesn't he be God in this moment? Because loss feeds bitterness, and it's a bitterness that gets directed at God almost all the time. But here's what we find, my friends. The Lord feeds. The Lord provides. Loss feeds loneliness, loss feeds bitterness, but the Lord feeds. Where do they come back to? They come back to Bethlehem. What does Bethlehem mean? It means the house of bread. It's where Jesus was born. It's a place that even by its name says you will be provided for. It says they come back and it's the beginning of barley season. Barley season, everyone! That's good, that's right. That's good news. What was barley? Barley was the most basic, essential form of food in order to make bread. It was what poor people used to make bread. It was cheaper than wheat, and it was the most basic, easiest thing to get to. It was the beginning of barley season. Remember Naomi and Ruth, they're coming back, they have nothing. And next week we're going to talk about poverty and how God shows himself in our poverty. And yes, we do have poverty. You may not realize that, but we do. But God begins revealing he's going to take care of them. And then there's people. There's believers. People at least who believe in Yahweh. People who believe in El Shaddai. Remember, Naomi comes back with Ruth, and it says all the women were stirred. They were so excited to see her. There was a buzz. It's Naomi. Is that Naomi? It's kind of like if you were away from the church for a long time, and people are like, I don't know where they went. Where did they go? And all of a sudden, you come back, there'd be a stirring. And I would be the first in line. I'd be like, I am so glad to see you. I've missed you where you've been. And then I'd probably say something sarcastic like, let me show you to the visitor center. I would do something weird. But, it's that idea, though. There's this stirring. There's an excitement because people who love the Lord do love you. Even though you have felt like they don't. Even as you've pushed people away. The church, God provides. And people should be excited to see you. Guess who calls her Mara? Naomi says, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. Guess who calls her Mara? No one. No one calls her Mara. I get it, Naomi. I get that that's what you want. I get that that's how you feel, but I'm not going to call you Mara. No one refers to Naomi as Mara. Only Naomi. So the Lord provides. He feeds. There in Bethlehem, the beginning of barley season, and friends. Now, does that fix all of the loss? No. It still hurts. But don't miss the places where God is starting to show his love. You're not alone. How good of God to even provide Ruth, who was not even a believer. How good of God to give a friend. How good of God to lead her back to the house of bread. How good of God to bring her at a time when the barley season or the barley harvest was just beginning. How good of God to allow people to remember her, to have missed her, and to be glad that she's back. For us, I don't know where you are in your hurt, in your sense of loss. And maybe you feel great this morning. If you do, good, that's wonderful. But all of us have gone through moments and things where we feel like we've lost something. We feel like we've lost dignity. We've lost something in our workplace or in our homes or with our families. No matter where you're at, though, know this. Loss is always going to try to work against you. Jesus is always going to work for you. Loss is going to make you want to push people away, while Jesus is calling you to step in. What can Jesus do with barley and friends other than make delicious beer? Come on, church, that was funny. John chapter 6 tells us that little boy had 5 barley loaves of bread. What can Jesus do with barley and friends? He can feed the multitudes. That little boy who provided his sack lunch was probably not rich. To have just 5 barley loaves of bread, 2 fish. Jesus says, I'll take that. And I'll multiply it. And I'll multiply it. And I'll multiply it. And I'll multiply it. Was it a loss for that little boy? Yeah, he lost his lunch. But what did he get? So much more. This morning it might be a morning where you're saying, there are things that I've lost that are just crushing me. It hurts. I'm frustrated. I feel irritated. Sometimes for some of us, it's even just somebody pulling in front of us and we feel like I lost my position in the line. You got that loss and you're like, I'm angry and now I want to push people away. Sometimes it's genuine, deep, real pain. And maybe this morning is just a time to say, all right, Jesus, what I have, my loss, here, I'm giving it to you. Maybe there are things this morning that you've been hanging on to so tightly that you refuse to lose it. And now it might be a moment to say, Jesus, I'm going to give this to you. I'm letting go of this. I want you to multiply it for the glory of your name. Because if we try to hang on to our life, then we actually lose it, Jesus says. But if you lose your life for his sake, if you lose it for his sake, then you gain it. Are you with me, church? So now might be a time to say, I have this loss, whatever it might be. And Jesus, I'm coming now to the bread of life. I'm entering into a beginning of barley harvest. I feel poor on the inside. But now there's hope. Because he loves you.